I'm Sophie. I'll be presenting the workshop today, and I have my colleagues here, Florence and Brenda. Okay, so if we're all good to start, I think I'll start. Okay. Before we start the workshop, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Macquarie University land, the Wadawurrung clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the Dreamtime. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Okay, so in today's workshop, we're going to look at APA 7. Okay, we're going to look at, what you need to reference. We're going to go over some referencing principles. We're going to look at in-text citations, as well as look at reference lists. Okay, so APA 7 is the official version of APA style. Okay, so it became the official version on 19th of March in 2020. So there are other versions of APA. So there's APA 6, but APA 7 is the newest one. Okay. Now, APA 7 or APA style, APA referencing style, has very particular rules when it comes to writing and publishing. So, for example, they really dictate how to format your manuscript. So they have rules in how you should present your work. So, for example, it should be double spaced, it should be Times New Roman 11, or you could choose one of these other font types, but basically, 11 points there for most of them. And they like you to have the page number on the top right corner. The style also, kind of has rules in terms of like your title page and that it needs to have like a running head with page numbers. So it's a style that is very, very particular. It also tells you, how you should be writing as well. So, it doesn't really want you to be using passive voice, okay? You don't use contractions and you use proper punctuation. And the one part of the style that we'll be, looking at today more closely is the citing and referencing aspects of the style. So again, APA 7 has very particular rules when it comes to citing and formatting the references. Okay, so what do you need to reference? So if you could put your answers in the chat, and because my chat has disappeared, I'm going to ask Florence and Brenda to perhaps relay some of the answers in the chat for me. Okay, so what do we need to reference? So, put what you think in there in the chat. Yeah, the source. Yeah. The quote of somebody. Yeah. You have to include the author date. That's correct. Okay, cool. I've got my chat up so I can see the answers coming in. Yeah. Okay. So that's right that we, need to reference the source. Oh, yes, the IDs of authors. Great. Academic journals and websites. Yes. So when we're citing, we really need to reference other people's ideas, okay, other theories, research, photos, data, graphs, and code as well. Okay, so anything we take from somewhere else, we actually need to reference it if it's not our own, okay. So we also need to reference other people's exact words. So we had their quotation, somebody put there in the chat, and that's right as well. So whenever you take something verbatim, you also need to reference that. Okay. You don't need to reference commonly known facts. For example, China has the largest population in the world and every cell has a nucleus. Okay, so, things that are common knowledge or that are facts, okay, commonly known facts, we don't need to reference. Now, I have here that you don't need to reference your opinion, okay, but this is true, okay, but it also depends on when you're using your opinion. Does anyone have an idea as to what I'm getting at when I say this, that it depends when you use your opinion? You can put your answer in the chat. Ooh, self-plagiarism is a good one, actually. That wasn't where I was going, but I'm actually really glad you brought that up. So yeah, so let's talk about self-plagiarism. So self-plagiarism is also, I guess, when you're using work that you've already presented, published or submitted, and then you use it again without acknowledging it, is self-plagiarism. So yeah, so you do need to always reference, okay, or refer to or acknowledge that you've used that information elsewhere, either in another piece of work or something that you published previously. So thank you so much for putting that in the chat there. That was really good. So what I mean by your own opinion is a lot of the times, at uni, we are asked to put a position on a topic. And a lot of the times it's kind of like our own opinion, because we might have a question that says, do you believe in, X, Y, and Z? That's a bad example, but like, do you have an opinion on, X, Y, and Z? And, tell us what it is. So it is asking for your opinion. However, you need to have evidence, okay? You need to have, I guess, sources or references to support your opinion. So you can always have an opinion when you're answering essay questions, but you also then need to back up your opinion with some evidence as well. So generally, it just depends with your own opinion on how you're using it. Okay, I hope that made sense. All right, let's keep going. Okay. So there are particular principles, okay, for APA 7, all right, or just the APA style, okay. So APA uses the author date system, okay, so that means that when you're doing an in-text citation, you always include the author and the date. So the date, we say, is the year of publication. So this allows the reader to instantly see the source and then to find it in the reference list, which is in alphabetical order, which we'll talk about later. So now there are two elements in referencing. So we have the in-text citation and the reference list. Okay, so we can see here that we have an in-text citation there. Okay, so we have there a nice little sentence. We have research shows that in softer disciplines such as sociology and marketing, more citations are used, while in engineering and physics, fewer citations appear. And then in brackets there, okay, we have Highland, we have a comma, we have 2004, and then we have a full stop. So that's an in-text citation. Okay. And then we have our reference list. So because we've used Highland in the body of our work, we then have to include him in our reference list. Okay, so here in our reference list, we have the citation there. So we have Highland, his initial K there, full stop, year of publication. Okay, we have the title of the book in italics, and then we have where the publication location is, and then the publication house there, or the publisher. Okay, so I've got a message there in the chat by Luong Ling. If you could change your to everybody so that Florence and Brenda can also see your question, because otherwise only I'll be able to see your question. Okay, but I will read out your question to everyone. Okay, they've asked, when will we put a comma after the name in the in-text citation? So, okay, we will look at this more closely, but I will answer this now. So always when you have an in-text citation and you're using information first, so this is the style that we're using here, where we have research shows and we have all of this information, and then we have a citation at the end there, so Highland, 2004. Okay, we always put the comma after the surname. Okay, so whenever you have a citation, you always put the comma after the surname. All right. Okay, now there's one thing that I need to point out, is that in APA 7, we actually don't need to include the place of publication. Okay, so we only need to include the publisher or the publishing house. Okay, So we will look at, in-text citations more closely. So don't worry about that. All right, let's continue on. Okay, so here are the basic rules. Every author cited, in the body of your work should be listed in your reference list. So every entry in your reference list should be cited in your paper at least once, which means whatever is in the body of your work, okay, whatever citations you have in your report or in your essay that you've put in text citation, okay, it has to appear in your reference list. It has to match. Okay. All right. So let's look at these particular citations here. All right, let's look at the first one. All right, so we have here Smith, 2002, states that information overload may cause measurable increases in stress. Okay, what can you tell me about the citation here? What's happening in this sentence? Or another way I'll ask you the question is, what citation details can we see? Okay, so what citation details can we see here? And you can pop them in the chat. Anyone? No? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Ivy, you said the name, the publishing year, and the page number. Yep. Okay, the connection between the name, year, and page. Yes, awesome. Direct quote, go with the page number. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's right. Okay, so we have those particular referencing details. Okay, so we do have the year of publication and we have the page number. Okay, and what we've done here is we've used the author in our sentence. So we have Smith, 2002, publication states that. And then we have our sentence, information overload may cause measurable increases in stress. Okay, and we have that in quotation marks, which means it's being pulled verbatim, from the article or the book. Okay, and then we have the page number there in brackets. Okay, great. So in this particular sentence here, we're using the author as a subject and a reporting verb. So we're using Smith, okay, and then we say states that, and then we have the information. What about the next one? What is this one doing a little bit differently? So it has all of the same kind of information that you've told me, but what about the start of it? What is it doing that's a bit different? Can anyone point it out? Yeah, that's right. The author is not the subject of the sentence. Yep. And Thal says it's using according to, correct. So in this one, in this example, we're using according to Smith, okay? And then we have our information there along with our reference details. So we use the author in the reporting phrase. Okay, great. All right. What about, and we call this author prominent or author first. So whenever we use or include the author in our sentence, okay, we say it's author prominent. Right. What about the next example that I have there? What can you tell me about this one? What's different here? Because there's a big difference here, right? What's happening? Yeah, it's a paraphrase. That's right. Okay. Excellent. So we have here, information overload is likely to cause actual stress. Okay, so we have no quotations in there, which means, it's a paraphrase. We haven't taken anything verbatim. We've put it in our own words. And then we have the citation at the end of the information, right? So we have Smith, okay, comma after the surname, okay. Then we have the year of publication, 2002, okay. And then comma, and then we have the page number, which is actually incorrect, okay? Because in a paraphrase, we actually don't need to include the page number, okay? So there's an error there in that particular citation because it doesn't need to include the page number. So we only include the page number when we have a direct quote. Okay, so when we give a citation at the end of the information, we call this information prominent. All right. So generally, when you're writing and including your sources or, your research, all the information that you found, you really want to, state in your work that that it's coming from somewhere. So for example, we have, Smith states that according to Smith, okay, when you want to include the author in there. And then here we have, we don't have that here. We just have the information when we're using the information first, and we have the citation there at the end. Okay. So we want to use a mixture of these styles when we're writing. Now, what about the last example that I have here? What's going on here? Yeah, okay. Now we know it's a quote because we have the page number, okay. And, it's saying according to Maxwell, right? So we know that it's, they're referring to the author there. Okay, so we call this a long quote, right? Because it's more than, I think, 40 words. Yes, I was right. So again, with APA, when you have a long quote, when it's 40 words more, there's specific formatting requirements. You have to indent the quote, you don't use quotation marks, and it's single spaced, okay? So this is a lot of information to remember. So I always tell students that there's no point in trying to remember all of this information. It's just too hard because as you go on, we'll see other rules that APA has. It's very difficult, right? So what you need to do is just always have a copy of the APA guide with you. Lots of different universities have a version, okay, that's free access. So for example, you could try Googling the UQ, University of Queensland's APA referencing style guide, and that's a really good one. And then it'll have all of that there for you if you can't have a copy of the actual manual. So always refer to your guide. Don't try to remember all of this information. Okay. So what are the basic elements in every in-text citation? Okay, so we have the author's family name, okay, no initials, so it's only ever the author's family name. Okay, so the author could be an organization, so for example, the United Nations Refugee Agency. Okay, if there's no author at all, okay, it could be the name of the title, so some newspaper article titles, okay. We always include the year of publication, okay. And if there's no date, then you use ND. And sometimes, okay, a page number. So use whenever you have a direct quote, okay, so we're using the author's words, or paraphrasing a specific item of information, especially when it would help an interested reader to locate the relevant passage in a long or complicated or complex text. Okay, so that's when we generally use page numbers when we have a quote. And you can, I guess, use it when you're trying to pinpoint a specific piece of information. Okay. And I see that Florence has put the UQ guide up there, which is amazing. Another really good website is the APA blog. That is also really, really handy as well, because, you know, not everyone has access to the book. Like I often don't have access to the book. So I always go to the UQ guide, or I go to the blog, the APA blog. I don't know if Florence or Brenda, if you could put that in the chat too, because that's really informative as well. Whenever you have a kind of a query about how to reference a particular thing, you can usually find it there. Okay, well, let's keep going. All right, so here are some examples. Okay, we've looked at earlier. So here we have, you know, a paraphrase example. Travers, okay, is the author. Year of publication 2009, identifies lack of control as the factor that best predicts the occurrence of stress. Okay, that's nice, right? And then we have our direct quote example here, where we have lack of control has been found to be the single most important predictor of stress. And we have that in quotation marks because that's been taken verbatim. And then our citation there, or our reference, we have in brackets, we have Travers, which is our author. We have the comma, you know, right after the author's surname. We have the year of publication along with another comma. Okay. Then we have a little p and a full stop, and then a space, and then the page number. We close the bracket and the full stop at the end. So the full stop will always go at the end of the citation, not beforehand, when you're using information first. So remember, you know, when we have the information first, like our direct quote example, okay, we put the full stop at the end of the reference, okay, but when we are using author style or author first, because our author appears, you know, in the sentence, okay, then the full stop is as normal at the end of the sentence. All right. Okay, so to quote or not to quote? Okay, you know, paraphrases and direct quotes. So which type of citation is most commonly used and why? I'm actually going to throw this question out to everyone. What do you think? You know, should we paraphrase or should we direct quote? Which one should we use more? Yes, that makes me really happy. Okay, great. So yeah, that's right. Okay, we should paraphrase. Okay, and the reason why, you know, we paraphrase, or why it's, you know, most commonly used and why it's the best thing to do when you are citing, okay, is because it shows your educator, it shows your teacher that you understand the readings, okay, you understand all that research that you've done, okay, and then it allows you, you know, weaving that information into your own writing, you know, without constant changes of tone or voice. So you can really make it your own by putting it in your own words, okay, and really show your voice, okay. If you're just, you know, copy and pasting and quoting all the time, you don't really get to show your teacher that you understand what you've read, that you've understood what you've read, and you're not really, you know, showing your voice. And then the tone, you know, it's not always going to be, it's going to be a mishmash of like tone. So that's why it's always best to paraphrase. Okay. So when should we quote then? So, or what should you do when you quote? But before we get into that, you know, when should you quote? I always tell my students that you should quote to use effect, okay, so for stylistic purposes, because you have a really great quote, and if you paraphrase it, it's going to take away the effect and it's really going to support my claim or my idea, then that's when you should just, you know, use that quote, okay. Another reason, why we would quote rather than paraphrase is if the quote is, you know, a really, really good quote, and if you were to paraphrase it, it would lose its meaning, or, you know, it's something really difficult to paraphrase, then we would quote it. I say keep it as a quote then. But, you know, you don't just plonk it in there, copy and paste. All right. So what do you do when you quote? You should always introduce a quote. So I don't know if you have noticed, but all the examples that I've shown you today, there's always a nice leading sentence before the actual quotation itself. So always introduce the quote when you are quoting. Okay, and it's preferable to use phrases or partial quotes. So you don't want to use the whole sentence, okay, or the whole passage. You just want to use parts of it. Okay, so it integrates with your own writing. And then you also have to ensure that the quote fits into your work grammatically as well. So let's look at examples here. So here, using the information first style, okay, we have the information. One type of critical thinking is looking at how a concept or theory is applied in the real world. And that's our direct quote there. We can see with the quotation marks. And then we have our reference there at the end. Okay, we have brick, comma, year of publication, comma, page number, the little p, full stop, 23, close bracket, full stop. Okay, so see how we've, introduced that quote with a lovely leading sentence there. With the author first style, okay, in our second example here, we have Pearson, year of publication, so 2014, argues that choice is more than just freedom. It is, and then we have our quote, a power because with it comes responsibility. And then we have the page number there, okay, in brackets. All right, and you can see our quote there is in double quotation marks. So it's always best to, okay, integrate the quote within your own writing and to always introduce the quote. Okay, I might pause here and see if anybody has any questions before we go on. Right, so just pop them in the chat and Florence and Brenda will answer them. I've got the chat open as well, so if I see one come in, I'll stop and answer it as well. But if there's nothing at the moment, I'll just continue on then. Okay.
Sophie, could I add a point?
Oh, of course, Florence.
The use of page number, because sometimes students feel confused. You explain really clearly for APA style, unless it is a quote, we don't need the page number. However, sometimes lecturers may prefer students to add the page number. So for students, if you are in doubt, always ask your lecturer or tutor whether you need to include the page number. So yeah, just want to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Florence. And Lan, there, I see you put a question in the chat. You have, for example, you have name year. So do we need to put the comma after the name? Yes. So I'm just going to type in the chat. Okay, we'll just use my name as an example. Okay, so let's say it's, well, let's list Florence's because it's shorter. So we have Ma, okay, I'm putting this in the chat so you'll be able to see. And let's say, Florence wrote something last year. So the year of publication is 2021. Okay, so Lan, that's what it would look like. We have the surname, we have a comma straight after the surname, then we have a space, and then we have the year of publication. Okay. All right, I'll keep going.
Sophie?
Oh, yes, Brenda.
I'm adding the other one as well in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Go for it.
The phrase one.
Yeah. So, Lan, yes, you noticed I did not put a full stop. I pressed enter too soon. And yes, the full stop should go after the citation. Okay, if it's done at the end, yes. So it would be, let's just say, I'm going to say ... My sentence, is my information. Okay, because this is information first. It would be like this. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so as I said earlier, APA has many rules, all right? So that's why I'm saying, it's not really worth trying to remember all of those rules because it's too difficult. that's why you should just always refer to the guide, okay? And there are so many freely available on the internet if you can't get a copy of the book. So just go to the internet and find the guide. We really like the UQ one that I mentioned earlier. So, for example, the differences are, okay, or the rules, when you have one author, okay, it's pretty simple. If you're using author first or author prominent, it's just the surname, okay, and then the year of publication. If you use information first, we have the surname, you know, comma after the surname, a year of publication in brackets, okay? Now, if there are two authors, right, this is where it gets a little bit different. So if you're using author first, so we're using the authors in our sentence, we have here in our example, we have Smith and Jones, okay, pretty simple, okay? Then we have the year of publication. All right, when we use information prominent, okay, we have Smith and we have and, but we're not using the word and, it changes now, okay? We're using the ampersand, so we're using the and symbol instead. Then we have Jones and then, you know, comma, and then your publication, full stop. Yeah, okay. And then if we have 3 or more authors, right, okay, it changes again. So we don't list the 3 authors or more than the 3, okay? We just use the first author. So we have Smith, then we use the phrase et al, okay? And see how there's a full stop after the L there. So et al, full stop, and then year of publication. So we say Smith et al argues that, okay? Or argue that because there's more people there, sorry. All right, and that's when we include the author in the sentence. So when we're using information first, okay, but we have all of our referencing details in parentheses, it's going to be Smith. So the first author's surname, we're going to use et al, full stop, comma, and then year of publication, and then close the bracket. All right, so a lot of rules. So that's why it's just best to actually look at the guide. All right, so don't try and memorize it. Yes, thank you. You don't have a name there, so I don't know, you know, I can't thank you via your name, but yes, that's right. So et al means and others. Yeah, so it's Latin, and yeah, and so we do use it to avoid writing, yeah, a long list of people. That's right. Thank you so much for explaining that to everyone. That's great. All right. So, I've pointed all those out there. So they're the main differences there. Okay. Now, in the reference list as well, okay, there are also more rules, and we'll get into the reference list a little later in the workshop. Okay. But in the reference list, you know, if you have an article or a book and there are 20 authors, you have to list all of the authors. Okay, if there are 21 or more authors, you list the first 19 authors and then the last one. You know, so again, really kind of tricky rules that you wouldn't necessarily just remember off the top of your head. So that's why don't try and memorize it, always refer to the guide. Okay. So sometimes you'll come across situations where you'll have multiple citations in the same parentheses. So basically you're kind of referencing multiple works. Okay. So here, you know, you might have 2 or more works by different authors. All right. In this case, you're going to list them alphabetically. You're going to separate each work, okay, with a semicolon, like this. Okay, so in our example here, we have, you know, we want to put several studies in our sentence, or here we have several studies, and then we have the several studies. Okay, we have Anadre 2006, see the semicolon. Then we have Torres and Lee, comma, 2010, semicolon. And then we have the third study, we have Zhang, comma, and then your publication, and the close bracket, have suggested that. Okay, so that's how we you know, reference multiple works. Okay. All right. So just to reiterate, when we're referencing multiple works, Okay, we have to list them alphabetically and we separate each work with a semicolon. Now, you may have a situation where you have 2 or more works by the same author. Okay, so the same person has written 2 or more works. So again, here you would list by year of publication and give the author's surname once. Okay, and each subsequent work, you only give the year of publication. And you would separate them by a comma. Okay, so here we have an example of this. So past research, okay, and then we have our reference Davis, okay, 1990, 2006. So this indicates that Davis has written both this 1990 publication and this 2006 publication, reveals that. So this is how we would reference, multiple works by the same author. All right, now you might have a situation where you have 2 or more works by the same author with the same publication date. So they're published in the same year. Okay. So here it gets a little bit tricky. You have to add an A, B, C, etc. after the year and then repeat the year. Okay, and you would do the same in the reference list as well. So for example, in the in-text citation, we have here several recent articles, can't even pronounce this, I'll try. Kanajara, okay, 2014A, 2014B, they in brackets have discussed the issue of. So we know that the author has published works in 2014 twice, okay, and we know that in our reference list we can distinguish which one because we have an A and B next to the year of publication. All right. So this again is a lot of information, so always best to refer back to the guide. Okay. Now, you also may come across another situation where you are reading an article or book that cites another article or book, okay? But you haven't read what they're citing in that book, okay? So for example, you're reading an article by Andrade and in which Andrade cites Trice, okay? You want to use Trice points in your paper, but you haven't actually read Trice, okay? You've only read the paper by Andrade, but Andrade, cites Trice, okay? So in this situation, we call that a secondary source. And how you would, cite this is you would mention both in your in-text citation using as cited in. So here we have, our examples. So our first example there we can have Trice, okay, 2004. So the year that Trice, said this, okay, as cited in Andrade, okay, 2006. And then we have the page number, page 145 states that. Okay, so this is a nice author first example. Okay, and then here that's a nice, author first example. And here we have our information first example. We have plagiarism can be a culture specific concept. And we have Trice, 2004, as cited in Andrade, 2006, and then the page number there. Okay, so when you have a secondary source, you have to include that phrase there as cited in. Sorry, just grabbing a bit of water. Okay. Now, when it comes to your reference list, you only list the article or book that you actually read. Okay, so in this example, we haven't read Trice, okay, because Andrade has included Trice in their article or in their book, okay? So, and because we only have the copy of Andrade's article, we have to cite Andrade. So here we can see in our references example, we have Andrade, okay? And then the initials, and then year of publication, And then we have, all the other referencing details that we will look at later on in the workshop. Okay. So any questions about secondary sources before I go on? No? Okay. And again, just pop them in the chat and Florence and Brenda will answer them for you, or they'll relay that question to me. All right, let's continue.
So
Oh,
the
that's cool.
question,
Yes, okay, I'll go back. What if we quote with a secondary source? What if we quote with a secondary source? So that's okay. So if you use the quote from a secondary source, that's fine. So for example, let's use the author first one. Okay, let's say, Trice, states that, and we had an actual quote, it would be fine. So it would be exactly the same thing. So basically you would have, I don't know if Brenda or Florence, you want to just quickly write this out so the student can see it. But basically you would have Trice, okay, and then in brackets 2004 as cited in Andrade 2006, the page number, close the bracket, states that, and then we have the quote. Okay. And you've actually picked up that, in this, it would be a quote because we have the page number, right? Okay. And in our information first, we've kept the reason why we keep seeing the page number a lot in the paraphrased examples is because we say to the students at Macquarie, it depends on your educator. So a lot of educators will still want to know where the paraphrase has come from. And so we've kept it in there. But, you don't necessarily need the page number there, basically. But if it was a quote, it would be basically the same thing. You just have the quote there in quotation marks. Okay. All right, now it's your turn. So we have been given some of your writing samples. Okay, so this is, student work from IBS. And we're going to have a look and see, can you spot the citation error? All right. Okay. So let's look at this one. There are 2 citations in here. Can we see, what's wrong with them? What are and they're minor mistakes, but yeah, I want to see if you can pick them up after we've looked at in-text citations quite closely. Yes, great. Thank you very much. Yes, so that was the first one, right? Okay, missing the comma, right? There should be a comma after the surname. What's the next one? What's the next? There's another citation in there. Well, there's another reference to a source, another piece of work. Yeah, exactly. So we have according to the verb, but we don't have a citation, right? Okay, it's missing the year of publication. So whenever you're referring to a website or referring to somewhere else where you're using that information, you have to include the year of publication. You have to cite it. Okay, great. This is very good. All right. What about this one? What can we, what's happening here? Can you spot the citation error? Kim, yes. Yeah, yes. And what else though is, what else could we say about that? So I'll just highlight it, put the circle around it. What else is going on there that's kind of a bit strange with that one? So we know it's missing the publication year, the date, but what else is kind of odd? According to Jim Ryan. Anyone? Okay, because we only have 15 minutes to go, I'm going to give the answer. Not a published paper. Well, it could be published, so we don't know. So, but it could be. We're going to take the position that it is, you know, that it is out there and it's published somewhere. So let's say it is. I'm going to give it away. Yes, thank you, Min. Yes, don't use the full name, right? So it is missing the year of publication, that's right, but it is also, you know, has too much information. We don't need Jim there, right? We don't need the full name. We only ever need the surname, okay? So only the family name, not the first name when we're referencing in text, okay? All right, so it should be according to Ryan and then the year of publication. Thanks, Florence, yeah. Right, so no full name. Okay, let's keep going because I've got a few examples here. All right, what about this one? What's happening in here? Can anyone, you know, pick it up? Wrong. Okay. Yes, that is an error there. The full stop after the author's name, correct. We don't need a full stop, just a comma. But what is this? You know, it's a quote, but then there's like this name James Dean, and then we have a reference. So we would say that this is, you know, a secondary quote, right? So, you know, it should contain as cited in. So if this was, you know, if this was found in Greenberg, so if if I read Greenberg and I saw this quote from James Dean, then I would have to, you know, say as cited in, okay. And then you might not have the year that Dean said it, okay. So then you would just do the no date, all right. But because we pulled it from Greenberg, then we would have to cite it like this. All right, let's keep going. What about this one? Yeah, okay, I'm going to just jump in because of time. So, all right, we've got there Stephen Covey, okay, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, asserts that. What are we missing? Okay, we're missing the year of publication. So even if you're going to use the whole, you know, author's name, you don't need to do that. But if you do, you really only need to have the surname. But I understand what the student is trying to do here. We still need to include the year of publication. Okay. All right. And the next one. We've already had a similar error, so I might go just whiz through this. Okay, there's a full stop after the surname. We don't need that. Okay, it is, you know, extra punctuation. We just need the comma. That's it. All right, and the next one here. Okay, we've got a page number, but it's not a quote, so we don't need it. Okay, remember paraphrases, we don't need the page number. Okay, only quotes, we need the page number. So I'm sorry I'm racing through, just because we have 10 minutes left. All right, and the last one here. Okay. Right, so this one's a bit of a tricky one, and I'll quickly go through it. So the reason why I wanted to point this one out is if we read the sentence, we have, with a growth mindset, I view failure not as a sign of unintelligence, but rather a motivating opportunity for development and expanding our current faculties. Okay, and then we have the reference there. But, we're using first person I. So it's a little bit awkward and confusing because if this is your view, then, or your opinion, then you have a quotation there. I mean, a citation there. Okay, so that's something to think about when you're writing. So if it is a reflective piece of writing, okay, maybe this is not the best way to put the reference in like this. Okay, so you want to put your point of view, yes, but then you could say something like, Dweck, asserts that, and then you could paraphrase what he said to kind of back up, what your perspective of a growth mindset is. All right, now quickly onto reference lists. Okay, so I'm going to fly through this, and apologies, I wasn't keeping eye on the time. Okay, so when you have your reference list, it must start on your page. Okay, you have to have it titled references, and it should be centered, and I think also bolded. List all sources you have read and cited in your paper, and only these sources. So whatever you cite in the body of your work must appear in your reference list. No extra citations, only the ones that you've cited. List them in alphabetical order. Okay, and there's a really cool trick in Word where you can just list everything and then you can alphabetize it, okay, using the AZ button. Okay, in APA, they're not numbered, your references are not numbered, and they are formatted with a hanging indent, which again, you can do this in Word in the paragraph tab. All right. So the main types of sources included in a reference list, may include books, chapters in an edited book, journal articles, printed or electronic, newspapers, websites. Okay. And then we can also have a chapter in an edited book, which is a little bit tricky as well when you're referencing. So, these are when it's a book that has multiple authors within the book. So we call it an edited book. Here's an example. Okay, so this particular book has multiple authors within the book, and it's edited by Roberts there and Ash. Okay, so you cite the author of the chapter in your in-text citation. So here is our example there. So we're only using the author of the chapter. Okay, and then you cite the author of the chapter in your reference list, okay, using the special format for edited books. Again, too difficult to remember. So always look at your guide. Okay, let's go on. So again, really specific rules for different, source types. So I don't really have time to go through all of this, but basically in your reference list for APA, it is basically when it's a book, okay, it's going to be the author or authors, year of publication, the title of the book's in italics. If there's an edition, it'll be in brackets, and then you have the publisher. Okay, and if there's more than one, it's separated by a semicolon. Yes, it should be bolded. That's right, Kim. And centered. In an edited book, similarly, author, then your publication, title of the chapter though now, so not title of the book, but title of the chapter. Then we need to include this phrase in A editor and B editor. So you include the editors, okay, and then editors, they're in brackets, EDS, and then the title of the book in italics, okay, and then the page number and then the publisher. Journal articles, same author, year of publication, title of the article, okay, and then the title of the publication, okay, in italics. Then we need the volume number in italics, but the issue number is not in italics, okay, page number, and then the DOI, okay. And then for the website, it would be the author, okay, then we include the year, the month, and the date, and then the title of the document in italics, and then the URL. All right. So like I have said throughout, a lot of information, a lot of rules, and really difficult to kind of remember all of this. So always just refer to the guide. Okay. All right. So there's really specific punctuation that you have to include in your reference list. So always just substitute, you know, what you have with the example in the guide. All right, and for the last activity I have for you, because I think we still have, you know, a couple of minutes. Okay, can you spot the citation error here between the paragraph and then this is the reference list at the end for this body of work? So I've taken one paragraph and then there's the reference list. You know, what's happening? What's wrong? Anyone? All right, I'm going to give you the answer because we are short on time. Okay. So we have Dweck there, that's fine. Okay, we can see that. They put this citation in the body of their work and then it's in their reference list. But there's also this author here. They've also had this citation by Philo and O'Connor, but it is not in our reference list, okay? Whatever you put in text, so whatever's in the body of your work in your in-text citation must appear in your reference list.